This exhibition is bringing two kind of distinct materials and things together. It really began pre-pandemic and, just developed it over time, doing different projects. It started off with this one work that I wanted to do that was a cast porcelain work. And I had to get a kiln to do that work because it was so large. Just moving it to the kiln was very difficult, so that was how I got my first kiln. And then I've been working with ceramics since then. I kind of fell in love with the material and the process of it, and have been doing these wall works, and there's two of the wall works in this show. And about 4 years ago, I've been aware of, probably especially in America, our use of plastic and disposable plastic. And I live on the West Coast by the Pacific. And that's where the Pacific plastic patch was discovered by a sailor. And it's this huge island of plastic. It was sort of the first time that people realized that there was this giant body of plastic waste in the ocean. And it's, using plastic almost every day. It's almost a thoughtless, or had been a thoughtless container. And so I just started to collect it from my family because I think it was about 4 years ago, maybe a little bit more, that China stopped accepting recycling from America. And I had heard and began to understand that, and in further research that I've done, something like 2 to 9% of all plastic has ever been recycled. And just the thought of that scale, it's so huge. And so I just started collecting it. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And then I had the opportunity to do the show at Kunsthalle Zurich, which there's going to be a survey upstairs, but Daniel Baumann, who's the director there and curator, he likes to reserve the lower floor for new work. So I was thinking about what I wanted to do and decided to create kind of, I think of it as a kind of impossible landscape, something you can, or really seascape or skyscape, which you can really only do in art, And so it's like bringing together two places that can never be together, because asteroids exist in outer space. When an asteroid hits our atmosphere, it becomes a meteoroid, and I call these asteroids. So it's like two places that can't really be together, being together in one space. The reason that I brought them together was in 2019, there was an incident, which some people might remember, where it was reported just after an asteroid kind of whizzed by us really quickly, was it discovered. So it was it didn't hit us, but we didn't realize it was about to hit us or could have hit us until after it had already passed. And that asteroid is called 2019 OK. And it was the size that they consider to be what they call a city killer. And I just thought, that it was it just, because I was thinking about plastic a lot, and then asteroids are this thing that, we really can't control. And our plastic use, or our material use, is something, theoretically that we could control. This is just what's here is just one of the meerschaum drifts that's going to be in Zurich. And it's kind of a progression when they're all seen together. And I don't want to give too much away about that because it's yet to come. Meerschaum means seafoam in German. And so I wanted to the form that I was trying to sort of remind people of was a big foamy seafoam drift. So that's why they're all called meerschaum drifts. And of course that bringing up the ocean, I wanted you to think about the ocean and all the plastic that's going into it, and kind of that idea of how it gets, from us, or let's say in London, in the city of London, how does that migrate to the ocean, or even into the land, or the water table on land, because it is a toxic material and it is a petroleum product. And after it's turned into plastic, it can be very toxic once it does start to break down, which it can do. It breaks down, it does take many years for it to break down, but it does start to break down pretty rapidly in sunlight. So, once it particularizes, it goes into the soil, into the groundwater and everything. But for many years I've been interested in how it seems like as a species we're kind of turning the earth inside out. And ceramic also, clay is also found in the earth, obviously. And asteroids are just really fascinating. The first asteroid was discovered by I think it was a Franciscan brother. It was I think it was 18, I'm gonna get this date wrong, I think it was like 1858. And check me on that. And he named it Ceres, which is the Roman name for Demeter. And then after that, the subsequent asteroids that were discovered were named after female goddesses, because that's usually female goddesses, until they kind of ran out of goddess names, because more and more asteroids are being discovered all the time, especially now as we're able to see more with the technology that science has and astronomy has. So after they ran out of goddess names, they started using the name of gods, and then they started using, there's an asteroid called Krista, which, is a feminization of the name Christ. So that was another thing that happened, which I just find that all really fascinating. I don't know if I know exactly what it means, but there's something there. And now there's so many that they're also just called numbers, or they're called by the name of the person that discovered them, or by the name of their children, or there's all kinds of names. And so when I first started making the asteroids, I'm like, okay, so let's try to make an asteroid. And a lot of interesting shapes came out of that. And I mean, it sounds a little silly, but it took me a while before I'm like, oh, let's look on the NASA website and see what these asteroids really look like. I was having trouble with it. And I'm like, well, but what does an asteroid really look like? And so then I started researching them and finding out more about, how humans first discovered them, and this whole amazing naming thing that happened, which I just thought was really fascinating. And so then I started really getting into all the different goddesses. This is Pallas and this is Ida, and they're both, asteroids and goddesses. And the funny thing too, and the great thing too about the images of asteroids right now is they're just not really that clear. So you have a lot of play, to deciding how they should, or I have a lot of leeway. There's no real photorealism with the asteroids that much, except for a few of them. So it's they generally, have qualities. I don't know if I think of them as figurative, but I kind of think of them as portraiture. We think of plastic as being a new material, and it is a new material, but it comes from fossil fuels, like celluloid and things I think bakelite. Those were natural, vegetable-based plastics, and they had a pretty short lifespan. And so the plastics that are synthesized and made from petroleum have this very much longer lifespan. So in some ways plastic is a really old material, and in some ways it's a really new material, and just that we've been able to harness it for our use, compared to wood or something. As a product, using it as a product, it's such a short amount of time. I mean, Yeah, you're right. It was kind of like the 60s. Like I always think back to that movie, The Graduate, and it's plastics. It's like it was like the internet of the 60s or something. This is the new thing, and it's just taken over so much in the last, whatever that is, 70 years. It's ubiquitous and it's in everything. It feels like our psychology is behind our technology or something, this thing kind of like snuck up on us. It's so seductive, it's so great to have all this disposability or that feeling of that, that kind of, I think Roland Barthes, I'm going to get this a little bit wrong, but he wrote about plastic and was kind of amazed by how it could, could be a bucket and a jewel. That it had this wideness of use that could be so many things, from the very mundane to the extremely desired object. So it's a super interesting material. The way that it looks, it's not, it doesn't immediately spark anger or outrage. It sparks a curiosity, maybe. Like, what is that? When you first come to it. I mean, in some ways I don't even want to tell people that it's plastic, It's like I don't want that to become like a huge flag for the work, it's more interesting if you just encounter it and you're like, well, what is that? And then it occurs to you, and in that whole space of time, a lot can happen in a person's thought process.